This is part 2 of my Monza Senator A Vauxhall Royale Series 2 sunroof video. Now this shows the sunroof sub-assembly, or cassette as it's often called, assembled as it comes out of the car, except for one important difference. The metal panel that you can see is removed first. Apart from that, everything that you can see here will slide out from the sunroof garage towards the front of the car. You obviously have to do it carefully. I put a towel or something over the front of the roof so you don't scratch the paintwork, but the whole lot slides out. So that is basically how it slides back in again. And again, as I said, the metal panel is put on afterwards. I'm now going to turn this over to show you the headlining panel. This is the electric version of the sunroof, which is slightly different in the middle here, where it's got two threaded holes for the sunroof motor to be attached. But apart from that, it's the same. Note also that this is actually a Senator sunroof, and it's about 3 centimeters longer in both the length of the tracking and the depth of the sunroof and its trim panel. Apart from that, it's identical to the coupe version. Notice here how the cable has come out of its tracking. This has been in storage for quite a long time now, must be at least 10 years. I'll try to explain how it's removed from the car. Obviously, putting it back in is the reverse of this procedure. But the first thing to do is to put the sunroof into the tilt position, which this one obviously is a bit reluctant to do, as I'm holding the camera with one hand and trying to manipulate things with the other. But imagine that the sunroof is tilted. This panel will then be tilted upwards as well, which will show you a couple of wire frames here and a couple of coil springs attached to where my finger is. You reach inside with your finger or long nose pliers and detach that spring. You then push the lifting section of the trim panel down flat again. Then, by reaching inside the still tilted sunroof panel, like this, you can get your fingers on this edge and the whole trim panel will pull back underneath the sunroof. Underneath the roof. I'll just see if I can do it. Well, I'm not quite sure what's happened here, but it looks like years ago when we took this out of the car, we somehow reassembled it. So I can't actually show you. But basically, the trim panel, once you've done that, slides back. underneath the roof. It's only held in place at the front with a couple of spring clips, so you have to push a bit hard to start with, and then it'll release and it'll slide back quite easily right to the back here, thus exposing the metal panel and the tracking and the bits and pieces that hold the panel in place, as over here. This is what you'll see roughly when you slide the trim panel back. At the front, the metal panel is held on with this tilting bracket and 2 screws. So you simply undo the 2 screws, and that releases the front of the metal panel from the tracking there. This piece here is where the trim panel clips onto. So when you pull it back, remember that you're releasing it from a spring clip at the front as well. The rear of the metal panel is held in by this sliding control unit. This is actually part of the tracking mechanism, and when you remove this panel, it doesn't stay with the panel, it stays with the tracking. And all you have to do is undo this screw there, Phillips screw there, one on each side. Then you can lift the metal panel out of the aperture. All that will be left then is the tracking mechanism and the trim panel slid back behind underneath the roof. I'll just explain what these are. These are wind excluders which are affixed to the metal panel and help bridge the gap between the sunroof panel and the main roof when it's in the tilt position. One of the first things you do when you're reassembling one of these from scratch is to put the weather strip on all the way around, which isn't on this piece, it's not shown. Then you put these plastic bits on. Most important, you can't put the weather strip on if the plastic bits are not removed first. On the Series 1 cars, if you're doing a conversion, putting in a Series 2 sunroof into a Series 1 car like the Vauxhall Royale, you'll find that there's in the sort of guttering by the tracking, you'll find there's a little metal bracket which will obstruct this, so it has to be removed with a die grinder carefully. Even if you remove it, or most of it, you may find that this plastic piece still obstructs it slightly as it slides back and forward, so you may have to relieve this a bit with a file. Here we have another sunroof panel showing the weather seal along the sides. Note where it's joined. It just presses over like that. When you're reassembling one of these, you need to sometimes crimp this with a pair of pliers all the way around so that it grips the edges of the panel better. Otherwise you may find that once you've got it all assembled on the car and you go into the tilt position, the weather seal tends to drop off a little bit, which can be a bit annoying. So you have to see on this one it comes off quite easily. So you do have to make sure that it's quite firmly attached without going too mad, of course, otherwise you could damage it with your pliers, but you have to make sure it's on nice and firm. This shows the tracking without the headlining panel or the sunroof metal panel in place. Note how the guide blocks here are fixed. So basically, when you've taken off your metal sunroof panel, these bits are left behind. And also, I forgot, they're actually kept in place with 2 bolts, 2 Phillips screws, one there and one there. I'm not very good at this video business. There's a screw there at the front and a screw at the back. One at the front, you'll notice, is got a slotted hole. There we are. And also, you'll notice that this piece here, his arm is attached to it with a little sliding lug. This arm is attached to the rain gutter. So this here is actually quite an important adjustment. When you're fitting the sunroof metal panel on, that allows you to make sure that the panel is in exactly the right position fore and aft, because in effect it's kept in place by this lug, by this arm. And this arm is locked in place by this. Now, as they so often are, where my finger is, you'll see a little indent, little raised lump on this L-shaped bracket thing. That actually fits into that slot there, where my finger is. And that is what locks the sunroof panel in place when it's closed. That's very important. Notice also how this little L-shaped bracket is bent. As the years go by, it gradually fatigues and bends and can quite easily fail to do its job of locking. So when you're fitting the metal sunroof panel, you have to make sure that all these various parts are in exactly the right place before you do it all up. If you look carefully at these components, you'll see that it's not always easy to understand what they're supposed to do, but there's a reasoning behind it all, which I must admit can take quite a few years to figure out. So it's very important that you do it very carefully, otherwise the sunroof won't operate correctly. And more importantly, as I explained in my first video, this lug here, where my finger is, which is supposed to drop down through this larger slot at the front, where my finger is, when the sunroof starts moving into the retracted position, that can often break off, again through lack of adjustment. So basically, I think I've explained the main components of the sunroof and how it all fits together. So in video 3, I will then go into some detail on exactly how it's adjusted and assembled in sequence.